evening, folks. Thank you for watching this podcast. Tonight's podcast is a bombshell of a story. This podcast centers on what I call Dr. Anthony Fauci, the architect of the coronavirus cover-up. Well, the narrative of Dr. Anthony Fauci's involvement with the current coronavirus outbreak seems to be rearing its ugly head. Finally, Dr. Fauci, chief medical advisor to once President Donald Trump and now President Joe Biden, has a lot of explaining to do with regards to previous statements and testimonies made that are coming into question about what he knew about COVID-19 and the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Newly released documents appear to contradict Dr. Anthony Fauci's repeated claims that the NIH did not fund gain-of-function research on bat coronaviruses at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, according to an article on September 6, 2021 by Carolyn Downey of The Nation Review. This latest bombshell, according to The Intercept's writers Sharon Lerner, Mara Vistendal's story on September 6, 2021, was made public after The Intercept requested an FOI request, which is a Freedom of Information Act request, which any U.S. citizen can file to get information that the government has stored in the Library of Congress in most cases. Anyway, what they found out was that there were details of U.S.-funded research on several types of coronaviruses at the Wuhan Institute of Virology in China. So this was discovered in their FOI filing. The Intercept had obtained more than 900 pages of documents detailing the work of the EcoHealth Alliance, a U.S.-based health organization that used federal money to fund bad coronavirus research at the Chinese laboratory. The documents were released in connection with the ongoing Freedom of Information Act litigation by The Intercept against the National Institutes of Health, or NIH. The Intercept released the full documents to the public. So we definitely have a victory. Not only are we going to know about what happened at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, who was involved, right? And the money. You follow the money, right? Most things happen because there's money involved. So, as you can see, there was funding, federal funding, and we also have another player involved that I hadn't heard of until now, the EcoHealth Alliance, a U.S.-based health organization. All right, so let me tell you a little bit about The Intercept. The Intercept is an award-winning news organization dedicated to holding the powerful accountable through fearless adversarial journalism. Its in-depth investigations and unflinching analysis focus on politics, war, surveillance, corruption, the environment, technology, criminal justice, the media, and more. Don't you wish that CNN, MSNBC, NBC, ABC were like that? I'm pretty sure some of you are old enough to remember when the media actually reported the truth. Anyway, I'm going off tangent. This is a bombshell. So, how is Dr. Fauci involved? He repeatedly claims that the NIH did not fund gain-of-function research on bat coronaviruses at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. The grant was awarded for 5 years, from 2014 to 2019, and was subsequently renewed before being suspended by the Trump administration. The proposal, or the grant that was involved, was $599,000 which was directed to the Wuhan Institute of Virology for research designed to make the viruses, listen to this carefully, more dangerous and or infectious. And the authors acknowledged the danger associated with this work. And the authors being the scientists that were researching this. So remember that under the President Trump administration, he stated that the virus originated in Wuhan and that basically they were solely responsible, right? However, he didn't know that Dr. Fauci and the NIH were involved. Why not? Because Dr. Anthony Fauci was also the chief medical examiner under the Trump administration. You get it? Okay. That's why I call it the cover-up. Dr. Fauci has repeatedly insisted during the Senate testimony the research being funded by the NIH at the Wuhan Institute of Virology did not qualify as gain of function under the NIH's current definition. And I'm going to get to what gain of function means, and I'm going to explain it to you. Then you'll understand why Dr. Fauci testified under oath why he felt gain of function didn't qualify for the research done on the bat coronaviruses, and that the intent was to weaponize it, okay? Because he's using the NIH's definition of gain of function. So you're going to see how the lie unfolds and how this guy is responsible. All right. So there are critics, including Republican Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, who accuse Fauci of playing semantic games by excluding research that makes bat coronaviruses more transmissible, which is the commonly accepted definition of gain of function, from Fauci's more convenient definition. So Senator Rand Paul, who is in the medical profession, as most of you would know, he basically was saying that Dr. Fauci was playing word games with respect to gain of function definition. Now that's what we're going to get into right now. What does gain of function mean? Okay. Any type of virology research that results in the gain of a certain function. I know, right? It's not clear. Hold on. But the controversial type, including among scientists, is the research that causes a pathogen to be more infectious, particularly to humans. Did you hear that? Okay. So that was the research that was being conducted at the Wuhan Institute of Virology on behalf of the NIH and the EcoHealth Alliance. So we were using federal tax dollars to fund the weaponizing of a coronavirus to make it transmissible to humans. Why? Does that make sense? Who knows? A lot of questions come up. One question for me in particular that comes up, was it for the pharmaceutical companies to make a profit? Because, you know, let's be honest, folks. They have made vaccines, right, to fight the coronavirus. And the CEOs of the respective pharmaceutical companies are billionaires. And they will continue to be billionaires as long as people get inoculated with their vaccines. But I'm getting off tangent a little bit. But I wanted to put that out there. I think it's important to know who are the players and who benefits, but I can't prove that. So during the congressional hearings, Dr. Fauci basically denied this more than once. However, Republican Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, who sits on the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, he even suggested during the hearing in July that Fauci had been less honest when he alleged that the National Institutes of Health had had no hand in the Wuhan Institute of Virology's gain of function research to mutate animal viruses to infect humans. The senator felt so strongly by accusing Dr. Fauci of dancing around this because you're too obscure, or you're trying to obscure for 4 million deaths around the world. That is a very big accusation. So Senator Rand Paul is basically saying you're trying to cover up the fact that 4 million people have died around the world due to this research. So on Sunday that just passed, during a CNN interview with Dr. Anthony Fauci, he had the audacity to assert that disinformation is one of the enemies of public health, after CNN correspondent Jim Acosta accused Fox News host Tucker Carlson and the podcast host Joe Rogan of spreading debunked information. So here we are listening to this interview with Jim Acosta on CNN on Sunday. He's calling the kettle black. Yet he has now been exposed by these 900 pages of documentation. He knew, folks. He knew what was happening at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, especially because of his association with the NIH. Look it up. This is a fact. The best way to counter, he goes on to say, the best way to counter disinformation and misinformation is to try as best as we all can to get the proper and correct information out. Fauci, director of the National Institute of Allergies and Infectious Diseases and the White House chief medical advisor, said on CNN Sunday. The audacity for the guy to just, he's a bold-faced liar. But again, he goes on to say, but one of the enemies of public health is disinformation. And unfortunately, we do see that in some corners. Yeah, we see it from the corner of the White House because Dr. Anthony Fauci is chief medical advisor to President Joe Biden. Look, Dr. Fauci needs to be removed from the current administration. It is clear his actions of deceit and misinformation to Congress during a hearing and the public make him untrustworthy. In addition, he has continuously been misleading the public with contradictory methods to cope with the pandemic. But most of all, for funding virology research that eventually weaponized the coronavirus that was unleashed onto the globe. And this information is also going to have impact on the Biden administration as well. Because back in May, Biden had tasked the intelligence community to investigate what happened at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. They came back and told the president the results were inconclusive. What does inconclusive mean? Usually, when there's an investigation, it's closed because there are valid, verifiable facts. But inconclusive, to me, the definition is the case is still open. But on August 27th of this year, President Biden announced that the Intelligence Committee was inconclusive, right? And that's it. He left it. He left it just like that. He just, like a magician, smoke and mirrors, moved it away from the public view. So what this equates to is that Dr. Fauci and the NIH are going to get a presidential pass from criminal liability, folks. Just like the pharmaceutical companies, right? Who created these vaccines, they get a pass from any type of liability. So if you get the shot, you get sick, and you die, or a loved one dies, you can't sue them. The government has protected the pharmaceutical companies from being held liable for vaccines that we still don't know to this day how effective it is. And consider that there's a D variant out there that has exploded on the population. And none of the current vaccines seem to have curtailed this explosion. Well, at least that's what we're being told. So this is another Biden administration failure that will have consequences as another part of his legacy of incompetency. And the other thing that this does, it brings into question the motivation behind countries like ours, countries in Europe, mandating, or at least they're debating mandating vaccinations to those people who don't want them. So this cover-up really brings to focus that the United States had funded the Wuhan Institute of Virology to create a virus that was weaponized. Now, one has to ask, well, how did it get out of a P4 level facility? Which means it's airtight, it's secure, it's probably defended as heavily as Fort Knox. So we assume, because there are several P4 level types of virology institutes all over the globe. There's at least 14 that I'm aware of. So how did it escape? Because this coronavirus was not naturally made. It was man-made. If you don't believe me, do the research. You're going to find it. I've done the research, and there are components within the virus that can only have been added by a scientist. So, folks, I would be upset. I mean, this is a bombshell. Dr. Fauci should be in cuffs and leg irons and be held accountable. He should do a national pimp walk so people can see how he manipulated the story behind coronavirus. That's why, like I said, I called it like I see it, that he's the architect of the coronavirus cover-up. So thank you for tuning in. I wanted to give a shout out to my sister. It's her birthday today. I wanted to publicly wish her a happy birthday and tell her publicly as well that I love her and that the rest of her day goes well. Good night, everybody. Thank you again.